This is going to be different from my usual videos in that I'm talking about 6 volumes worth of 2 character arcs and how everything led to that highly contentious moment. As such, this isn't a video to convince you one way or the other. This is strictly informational, analyzing what and how things played out, not so much the quality of the execution. To illustrate the points I'm going to make in this video and to make editing easier, I'll be using still frames from the show for my narration and show the scenes from the series to show what exact lines of dialogue I am referring to punctuate these points. Now, a lot of what I'll say is conjecture and theory, and those statements will be accompanied by one of the adorable chibi Miis drawn by Kitty Kirishima. Now, without further ado, let's talk about Blake and Yang. Because of how involved Blake's storyline is, I'll be taking this in somewhat chronological order from Blake's perspective, and in order to talk about anything involving Blake, we have to talk about her history with the White Fang and Adam specifically. When discussing any information, it's important to consider the source. People have a tendency to bend the truth for the sake of self-preservation, so what we are actually shown should always triumph over what we are told. But when we hear it from multiple sources, especially when those sources have different agendas, then it becomes more believable. So we know Blake was born into the White Fang and would have likely met Adam at an early age.
And I was there. I was at the front of every rally. I took part in every boycott.
We know somewhere around 5 years before the start of the series, Gira stepped down and Sienna Khan took over.
5 years ago, our leader stepped down, and a new one took his place. A new leader.
The White Fang's tactics are admittedly more aggressive since you stepped down as High Leader.
At that time, Blake ran away from home to stay with the White Fang, calling her family cowards.
But you were right. I called you cowards.
It's okay.
Now, it's up to headcanons whether this behavior was influenced by Adam or was what drew her towards Adam.
My parents tried to get me to leave with them, but I refused. I had Adam and Ilya, after all.
I personally like to think mutual spite for Gira's perceived cowardice was the common ground over which they bonded, but that's just me. We do know, however, that Adam was seemingly always a spiteful dick. But he was seemingly passionate about the cause, which is what Blake liked about him.
First, I thought Adam was justice. Then, I thought he was passion. He wasn't any of those things. He was spite.
Eventually, this turned into manipulation. We've seen Adam guilt trip her into staying with the White Fang and by extension their relationship, by reminding her that only cowards abandon the cause.
What, do you want me to just abandon our cause? Like your parents?
No!
Eventually, Blake's desire for peace won out over Adam's desire for dominance, and she left him. And from there, it probably didn't settle in for Adam that Blake was gone for good until she started interfering with his plans directly. And the Vital Festival, on top of providing a great stage for his plans, also put names and faces to the ones Blake had ran to. Ruby Rose, Weishni, and Yang Xiaolong, her new surrogate family that she used to replace Adam.
What does she even see in you?
Now, the kind of relationship Blake and Adam had tends to royally fuck with people's minds. Blake was somewhat confrontational, as was her nature as an activist, but anytime someone, especially Weiss, rose to the challenge, she would fold like a deck of cards. She was scared. She was terrified that they would find out about her secrets, that they'd reject her and she'd run out of places to run and hide. Blake is inconsistent in her characterization, but I think they were going for an indecisive character. When it comes to the White Fang in volumes 1 and 2, Blake is conflicted. That doesn't translate well, and it's impossible to determine whether it's because of Erin's wooden performance, the line she was given, or Monty's direction. But this leads us to the volume 1 finale. Here, Blake is at her most conflicted. She knows what Adam is capable of, but I don't think she realizes that it's not just Adam. Situations like this, it's easy to put a face or name to your pain and put it all on that person. But seeing the White Fang working with Torchwick is the reality check Blake needed. Adam was just a symptom. He got that way because Sienna Khan praised those aspects of his character and made him that way.
He saved your life. He's a hero.
And the worst part was, it was working. We were being treated like equals.
And Weiss, as someone who is from the other side of the race war, sees right through the bullshit. Weiss's presence throughout these character arcs can't be understated and is the most sensational thing I've discovered upon revisiting the series as a whole. For whatever reason, Blake has it in her mind that love is conditional.
How can you still love me after what I did?
We see her struggling to wrap her head around that concept with Weiss, her own parents, and finally Yang. And going back to her fight with Weiss, both of them are having trouble seeing the trees for the forest. White Fang bad, SDC bad, neither one of them realizing that both groups are made of people capable of goodness. And honestly, I think Weiss realizes it first. She realizes Blake must have ran from them for a reason and welcomes her. Blake, on the other hand, tries to downplay her involvement in a pointless act of self-preservation.
You said you're not one of them anymore, right?
No, I haven't been since I was younger.
I don't want to hear it.
We know she's lying when she says that. We know she was up to no good right before the series began. And once again, Weiss cuts right through it. Where you come from is not as important as who you are now. And that lesson is what drives Blake into an obsession to save the White Fang. Once again, she blames everything on one person, this time Torchwick. She still doesn't get that these are all symptoms of a failed organization. This obsession is what draws Yang to her. Now, Yang has been an absent player throughout the story thus far. It's actually far and away my biggest problem with Volume 1 that she wasn't more involved in the finale. All we get is this little moment.
The innocent never run, Yang.
Where she's probably thinking about Raven. It's here that I wish to discuss the forces that shape these two characters and how they are better versions of those characters. Yang was undoubtedly shaped by Tai, Ruby, Summer, and even Crow, but her obsessive tendencies and abandonment issues were shaped by Raven, the mother who left her. And even when Raven had a chance to reunite with Yang, she treated her like crap. Blake and Raven ran from their problems, but Raven is still running. The fact that Blake came back at all does a better job at filling that hole in Yang's heart than anything else has. The commonalities between Yang and Adam are a little more spelled out. They're both prone to anger, both come from troubling backstories. Both of them have a similar semblance, which within the narrative doesn't mean anything, but for the purpose of analysis it does. Adam and Yang both get stronger by taking what is thrown at them, but Adam has to use a weapon as a medium. He has to use others, he has to treat them like tools. That is the source of his strength. The disruption of the White Fang at the end of Volume 5 and the lashing that followed stripped him of all such weapons. Yang, on the other hand, requires a bit of self-sacrifice. She trades off aura for raw strength, thus trading parts of her soul for the power to defend those she loves. And I think that's the biggest distinction that needs to be made. Adam always uses his semblance to destroy his enemies. Yang uses her semblance in that way a few times, but always with terrible results.
That's what you get, you little...
Yang Xiaolong, stand down!
Let me guess. I was sloppy.
No, you were predictable. Because not everyone else's is basically a temper tantrum.
The other times she uses her semblance are much more righteous, defending her team against the mech, clinching victory after Weiss sacrifices herself for her, and now taking on the proverbial demon from Blake's past. With that out of the way, the scene from Burning the Candle is pretty self-explanatory. Blake is obsessed to the point of insanity, Weiss convinces her to open up, which prompts Ruby to start a hunt for Torchwick. But his escape only makes things worse. Her grades are slipping, she has bags under her eyes, and is jumpier than usual. This only gets worse and worse as time moves on. Her friends hope to use the dance to break her mood, but she's refusing to go. She is insulted that Son of all people would think it's right for her to go. Ruby and Weiss are at a loss.
I still can't think of a way to change her mind.
When Yang steps up.
Trust me, Blake will be at the dance tomorrow.
This obsession is something Yang can relate to. She's able to level with Blake in a way nobody else has. She too has been hurt by things in her past, and the anecdote she shares with Blake convinces her that if she continues down this path, she's only going to get herself and the people she cares about hurt. What I think is a little less obvious is that, especially now, it's implied that this is the first time anyone ever sat Blake down and confronted her on her trauma. And I, for one, find that a hard pill to swallow, but it would go a long way in establishing their relationship and explaining why the final episodes of Volume 6 contain so many direct parallels to this moment. But it's equally important to keep this scene in mind for what it does for Yang's characterization. In a way, she has the same motivation as Ruby. There are some stark differences. I swear I didn't intend that pun. Namely that Ruby wants to be the hero for hero's sake. She wants to be like the heroes in stories so that everyone can live happily ever after. Yang, on the other hand, wants to get wrapped up in the thrill of adventure. But both of these are ingrained in the desire to help people.
See, my sister's starting there this year, and she's trying to become a huntress. And my parents always taught us to help others, so I thought, I might as well make a career out of it.
And we see that when Yang passes Blake off to Sun, someone she genuinely cares about, and tried helping her long before Yang got involved. We see this more overtly during the Mountain Glen sections. Blake is the most neurotic when it comes to her motivations. She still sees herself as a coward, whether that be someone who abandoned her first family, abandoned her second family, or was too scared of Adam to get out sooner, and she's still worried about what her past might do to her new family. Yang in the scene feels directionless. She wants to help people, but she also wants to live her life for herself, something she was never able to do as a child.
I had to keep things together. Alone. I've just kind of always gone with the flow, you know? I want to be a huntress. Not really because I want to be a hero. I want a life where I won't know what tomorrow will bring, and that'll be a good thing. I'm not like Ruby. She's always wanted to be a huntress. Even when she couldn't fight, she knew that's what she wanted to do.
It's here that we see how envious she is of Ruby, who doesn't doubt herself for a minute. Neither does Weiss. I really like that Weiss is the harsh one in this scene, shooting down all their doubts.
It's a job. We all had this romanticized vision of being a huntress in our heads. It's a job to protect the people.
Her goal is much more tangible than social equality or fulfilling adventure. She specifically wants to be like her grandfather. She wants to be both a huntress and the head of the SDC in order to bring honor back to the company. She has the ability to fight and the potential to become a great warrior. Becoming anything less is laziness, and laziness is unbefitting of the heiress. In her words, it's a job. And this moment echoes in both Blake and Yang's minds as they succeed in stopping the White Fang plot. Blake is relieved, but knows Adam is still out there. Yang, on the other hand, seems more unsatisfied, partially because she lost her fight against Neo, but also because Weiss was right. It was just a job, and there's no extra glory in doing what is exactly expected of you. This brings us to Volume 3, when Adam officially comes back into the series. Anyone that says, oh, they turned him into such and such, have no credibility. This isn't a video on how things ought to be done, but if I were to make one change, I would have him be both an obsessive ex-boyfriend and someone who genuinely cares about the Faunus plight. But before I get to that, I have to cover this moment.
Okay. Thank you.
From a character perspective, this scene is the worst in Volume 3. It draws direct parallels between Yang and Adam, that's all good.
Then it was self-defense. Before long, even I began to think he was right.
But then Blake asks Yang to apologize. Yang does not apologize and instead doubles down on her claims. And Blake forgives her anyway. For me, this flies directly in the face of everything Blake supposedly learned in earlier volumes and just makes her look like an idiot. I do think it's important to note, however, that a key difference between Yang lashing out at Mercury and Adam lashing out at everything is that Yang is being punished whereas Adam was praised for his behavior. So that's the thing. Adam is really just a spoiled brat who sees Blake as an object or a disobedient pet rather than a human being. Like, for real, just listen to some of this dialogue.
Is that what you've become, my love? A coward? What, do you want me to just abandon our cause? Like your parents?
No!
We were destined to light the fires of revolution.
But not before you've suffered for your betrayal, my love.
This could have been our day! Can't you see that?
I wanted peace!
What you want is impossible! All I want is you, Blake.
This is exactly what Blake feared. Her past came back. Adam helped destroy her school and hurt one of the people she cares about the most. That's why she left on her spiritual journey. And much has been said about how dumb she is in Volume 4, so I won't dwell on that. The main point I want to make about her arc here is that it's when she realizes that people do genuinely care about her and will no longer help her just because it's the right thing to do, rather will do it out of love.
You think you're being selfless, but you're not. That chameleon friend of yours got me pretty good. But I'd do it all again if it meant protecting you. Yang would say the same. When your friends fight for you, it's because we want to.
This is very esoteric and doesn't really sink in until Volume 6 because Sun is somewhat unconvincing. He's been trying to help her since before he even knew her. It's just in his nature, and her parents have unconditional love for their daughter and are more than willing to forgive her on those merits. Weiss has been sticking up for Blake ever since Volume 2, and Ruby was unconscious when Blake actually left and tends to see the better in people anyway. Yang, on the other hand, has every reason to hate Blake. Blake knew she had abandonment issues. Blake knew Yang needed support after the loss of her arm, and she left anyway. This is as far from her relationship with Adam as you can get. I do feel like Yang wanted to suppress whatever feelings she had about Blake in Volume 4. She was instead focused on Ruby. Ruby left too, but she had her reasons. She at least had the forethought to leave a note saying what she was doing and why. We're even told that Ruby wanted Yang to come with.
But maybe, if you joined us, he could tell you himself.
So Ruby was the one who motivated Yang to get back into the fight, but similarly to Volume 1, she didn't really know how to broach the subject of Blake. Luckily, Best Girl Weiss was already with Yang by the time they met up with Ruby, and was once again able to cut through the crap and talk to Yang. It's at this point I want to clarify why Blake leaving Yang hurt so much. Weiss hints at the fact Blake surely has motives. This idea that Blake left for good reasons is what softens Yang's heart.
Why do you think she did that? She tried to keep her past separated from us. She tried to protect us. The one thing she was afraid of actually happened.
Equally effective is the fact that when Blake does come back, she brings the cavalry to help win the Battle of Haven. But what hurt her in the first place wasn't that she left. Yang has dealt with that before. Raven left, Summer left, Weiss left, Ruby left, and no, Yang wasn't hurt because of romantic feelings. Summer left because of a mission. She died in the line of duty. She did the right thing. Weiss left because her father took her. She too had her own duties as the Schnee heiress and one of the few Atlas citizens who was there during the fall of Beacon. Ruby left because it was the right thing to do. All three of these figures had the ability to do something good and the will to act on that ability. Blake, and even more so Raven, didn't. That's why those things hurt.
No one blamed her for anything. If she had just talked to us, she would have known that.
Going back to the scene in Volume 2, Yang didn't comfort Blake because she was in love. It was the right thing to do. She opened up to Blake about all her insecurities and trauma, and Blake never reciprocated. All Blake would have had to do was tell Yang she was going to her family. All she had to do was open up about her fear of her past taking what she loved. All she had to do was tell Yang about this.
I will make it my mission to destroy everything you love.
But she got nothing, just like how Raven gave her no reason as to why she left. That's what hurts. This attitude continues through Volume 6, but Blake overcorrects and never addresses the root of the problem. The problem isn't that she left, it's that she never gave Yang any credit as a human being that genuinely cares about her. And the more she attempts to rectify the situation by coddling Yang, the more Yang is disappointed and hurt. Coming back wasn't good enough. The way Blake acts throughout these episodes is no different than the self-destructive tendencies she displayed in Volume 2. She's still objectifying her relationship with her team rather than genuinely opening up about the shit they've all gone through. So naturally, Yang visibly loses her cool when Blake tries helping her with her luggage or mentions that she's back to protect Yang. This isn't what Yang wanted. She didn't want someone to care for her. She wanted someone who had her back and had faith in her the way Ruby does.
I should have talked to you more. I wasn't sure if you wanted me around.
She wanted someone who would treat her like an adult the way Port and Oobleck do in Volume 4.
She's a mature young woman. If she can handle combat, she can handle a few jabs at her old man.
And I think I've been through enough to be considered an adult at this point.
She wanted Blake to open up to her the same way she did back in Volume 2. Ruby and or Jean somewhat forced the situation by having them work together during the escape from Argus. The setup is pretty logical. Yang is the only one with a vehicle and Blake is the only one with experience in sabotage. But once again, Blake screws up by treating Yang like a child who is incapable of helping.
Stealth isn't exactly your,
This puts her in a situation where she has to fight Adam alone. Adam is the literal manifestation of Blake's fears and Yang's trauma. He has dealt them both bad hands in the past. He's also the force that drove them apart. Blake fights him on her own and does fairly well, but lacks the power to gain the upper hand. Yang then gets her turn, and while she seems to be stronger than Adam, and is certainly putting all of her growth and training to the test, her fear and lack of skill keeps her from landing the final blow. In the end, Blake and Yang join hands. Blake is finally willing to treat Yang like an adult who can fend for herself, and Yang is finally willing to understand Blake's fears and help her work through them.
We're protecting each other.
This is what Yang wanted from the relationship ever since Volume 2, which is why certain shots and lines of dialogue directly parallel that earlier scene.
Just please, get some rest. Not just for you.
I'm not going to break my promise.
It's Adam's death at both of their hands that allows them to both find closure. I don't think this needs to be romantic, but if that's the direction they're going, they are now romantically primed. This group has formed something of a family unit, and though it stumbles in portraying them as such, scenes like this make it obvious that's what they're going for. After everything is said and done, it's not just Yang and Blake. Weiss is right there next to them. Ruby is at their feet, making sure they're all alright. Team Juniper and Oscar are right across the small hole of the ship, and the two older members of the crew aren't far either. As I said at the outset, outset, I'm not as interested in debating the validity of the ship or where they might go from here. If you want that, you can watch my Volume 6 The Art of Effort video, or my reviews on all the episodes, or my 3 shipping videos, or the podcast I hosted on the subject. This video was educational in nature, beating you over the head with what has actually happened in the show and what the crew did to build up to this moment. And considering I'm well over 3,000 words, I'd say anyone claiming this was forced is short-sighted at best and a complete imbecile at worst. If you think this was forced, then you weren't paying attention. Now, thinking it was rushed or that it was bad is an entirely different thing. Just like Yang's PTSD arc in Volume 4, a few more clashes with Adam or a few more scenes in between these major story beats would have went a long way in making the story feel more natural. Especially since so much focus is put on this relationship throughout Volume 6 that equally important relationships like the one between Yang and Ruby get put on the back burner if they get moments at all. There's also some problems with this relationship as it stands. Blake's characterization and motivations and all other aspects of her arc have been fucked beyond belief, and it's doubtful her character will ever truly recover from scenes like these.
No concept of privacy, no respect for personal space. I'm not here to fight the White Fang. I'm not here to fight anyone.
But why would... Hey, wait!
Because of that, Bumblebee might end up being a very toxic relationship if it doesn't become abundantly clear that Blake is done acting like a twat and if she remains inconsistent. This relationship should not come at the expense of the other interpersonal relationships in Ruby. Now that we're here, and now that we're in Atlas, I would like to see Weiss's role in the group dynamic be expanded on, and for Blake to take a backseat for the first time since the series began. So thank you all for indulging me in what will totally not be a controversial video that is far lengthier than my usual fare. Thank you to my patrons and all those who support me, and a special shout out to everyone who has joined me on the podcast, and anyone else who has helped me galvanize my thoughts on the subject. I'm Mediocrity4. Like, comment, and subscribe. Consider supporting my Patreon, and thanks for watching.